Hey everybody, it's John Lone King, and welcome to my next episode of From Profits to Properties, where I help you with business tactics that help you grow your business profits to beyond your wildest dreams, and then I help you take those profits and turn them into long-term wealth through investing in real estate, whether that's your first home, whether that's a luxury primary residence, whether that's a vacation home, or if you're looking to become a landlord and own one to many rental properties. I'm here to help guide you through all of that. So today my topic is creativity. How to be creative in business, but also beware of being too creative. And there's a lot of ways that this comes up in business. Some of it has to do with taxes. So I'm recording this episode and we're headed right after the end of the tax filing season, the extension season. So we're in mid to late October of 2025. And we just finished having to file your taxes. No matter who you are, no matter what cycle you're on, you are done and you have to have filed your taxes. And it's one of the most creative opportunities that business owners have to figure out, hey, how do I make sure that I don't pay as much money as I am likely to pay to my silent partner named Uncle Sam? And we can get super, super creative. And it's actually a really good example to start with, which is, hey, the more creative you get, the better it helps you in the short run. You can be super creative in finding ways to write things off, to not count income, to increase expenses, but the more creative you are, the more you run the risk of that creativity biting you later. Long-term risk of creativity is something you may not find out until you get audited. And then once you're audited, now you open Pandora's box and they're going to go back multiple years and start digging in on the same things to see if what you did in this creative year is something you did in other creative years. And so being creative can be good in the short term, but it can really burn you in the long term. And where I really want to take this is your focus on what is your core business? What is your core competency? And I see all too often business owners that I'm working with and talking to that are talking about their growth plans and their expansion plans. And they're getting creative and saying, hey, I think I could make money going over here and doing this. And I think I can make money going over there and doing that. And man, if I just did this different, we could do this and I could have that. And all of it might be true. And you can make some good money in the short term, and maybe you can make good money in the long term. But you have a really important cost called your opportunity cost. And it's something that in the short term, we don't pay enough attention to. Your opportunity cost is, hey, I'm going to put my resources, my time, my money, my people. I'm going to put my resources into a particular thing. If you have a staff person that's working 40 hours a week and you say, hey, I want you to equally divide your time between these 4 things, then you really have a 10-hour-a-week employee per task. But you actually have less because that employee now has to transition between one hat and another, between one role and another. And that creates inefficiencies. So you're actually getting less than that. You might be getting only 9 hours per week for each job because they have to close out what they were working on or jump back and forth. And the theory that we can multitask is a fallacy. Okay, we might switch tasks back and forth, but very rarely can we do multiple things at one time. Okay, I'm sitting here right now recording a podcast. There's no way I can be communicating with a client, thinking about a loan, structuring my marketing plan. Like I've got to be fully focused here or you're going to see it. You're going to feel it. And so multitasking isn't real. Okay. You're just simply trying to do multiple tasks by jumping from one thing to another. And so when you divide work, when you divide your resources, you don't get, there's always loss. There's always, you cut something, you take a block of cheese and you slice a block of cheese. You lose some of that cheese. There's some of the cheese that was lost as you were cutting it. So as you're dividing your activities, you're dividing your focus, you're dividing your resources by being creative and taking on other endeavors. The sum of the parts do not add up to the whole. Now, I'm not saying don't be creative because sometimes the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. But when you literally look at, hey, I'm taking 40 hours, or I'm taking this amount of resources, financial resources, and I'm putting them partially here and partially there. There's some loss in the fact that you're divvying something up, okay? You don't recognize that in the moment, or it seems insignificant, and maybe it is, but I just want you to think about it. I want you to recognize that fact, that you have an opportunity cost And that opportunity cost says I could have taken that resource and put it over here instead. Now, did you make money doing this creative thing? Maybe. And if you did, you might say, well, then it's a win. But what money could you have made had you done something else? Now, that's kind of scary in life to say, well, what if I would have made a different decision? What would my outcome have been? In certain situations, that is inappropriate. Okay, when it comes to relationships and marriage, that's a bad idea, and it is counterproductive. When it comes to business, if you're committed to doing something, and once you've committed and you're doing it, then see it through. Don't stop halfway through and say, I'm not getting the results that I wanted. You likely didn't give it enough time. But I'm talking about before you commit to it, and then once you've given that enough time for it to work. I was coaching one of my students today. I think you know I coach loan officers across the country. And we were talking about the time that student was spending working with business people, putting his efforts into getting leads, getting opportunities from financial planners, from estate planning attorneys, from divorce attorneys. And I was talking to a student and I said, look, your results, how long have you been trying this? He said, 2 years. He said, you've closed 3 transactions in the last 12 months from business people. You have to reevaluate. You have to decide, am I doing something wrong or am I doing the wrong something? And so that was my homework to him. Reevaluate this, figure it out. If you're doing something wrong, change what you're doing. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That is the definition of insanity. But instead, take an opportunity to step back, have a coach like what I'm doing for him and saying, hey, from the outside, I hear you talking about all of these effort that you're putting into this. Now, maybe you're describing the effort to me and I'm hearing it like it's a lot, but you're not putting in very much effort. And maybe your results match your effort. And then the question becomes, what would your results be if you had greater effort? What do you need to change? Or should you change doing what you're doing? In his case, should you stop going after business people? Maybe, I don't know. But there's an opportunity cost. He's being creative. I get a fair amount of business from business people. So I like that. I advised him to keep going down that road. But for some people, it's just not going to work. So being creative, finding something new to do. For me, it was social media marketing. It was my YouTube channel. It's doing this podcast. Now, I haven't gotten much out of the podcast, so you need to call me and get a loan from me so I can say it was worth it. I'm only partially kidding. But I've got a lot on my YouTube channel. I've also been doing it a lot longer. And so I know it takes a long time when you're doing things like this that I'm doing right here. I've been doing videos on my YouTube channel for years, and I stepped it up 3 years ago, and only now is it paying huge dividends for me. But I knew that what I was doing was the right thing, and I continued to iterate and tweak and change it. I was creative. I had many a coach tell me, John, you're wasting time on something that I've never seen somebody successfully do. And I could have stopped. I could have listened to them and said, you're right. If nobody else has done it, the chances of me doing it successfully are pretty slim. I'm going to listen and I'm going to change. And instead I said, no, it put a chip on my shoulder. And that chip on my shoulder said, hey, this this avenue that I'm going down of being creative, being different than what the status quo is on how I'm generating business, I know it's going to work and I'm going to prove them wrong. So don't be afraid of a chip on your shoulder. Don't be afraid of somebody telling you can't do something and saying, okay, you're right. Sometimes that's what you need, is a chip on your shoulder to go out and be more determined to get it done. And sometimes the best thing you can do is put that chip on somebody else's shoulder. Tell somebody that you believe in, that you want to succeed. Tell them you don't think they can do it. It's amazing. If they're the right person, be careful who you do that with. But if they're the right person, you just gave them a gift. If you have the right relationship, you might have just changed the trajectory of their business and their life. Now, you might not be as blunt as saying you can't do it, but somebody telling me, hey, I've never seen this work, I don't think it's going to work, that was all I needed to hear. And hearing it a few times continued to build the fire inside of me. And so my whole point as I wrap up this segment is, hey, be creative. Find ways to be creative, whether it's in your taxes, whether it's in your marketing, whether it's in what avenues of business lines that you are chasing. But understand there's a point when creativity needs to be reevaluated. You can be too creative, you can go too far, and it can create major issues for you. And so it's really, really important that you understand how long you should try something, what is a reasonable amount of time that you should get results, and have a specific deadline to say I'm going to reevaluate it at that time objectively, not emotionally. And have a game plan for what am I going to do if this happens versus that happens. That is the most important thing that you can do. And if you don't have a coach, if you don't have somebody who can talk through that with you, I strongly suggest AI. You can have these business conversations with the AI system of your choice. And the more of these conversations you have with the same AI, the more it knows your business, the more it's going to help you in the future to have more better conversations like this because it understands your business. Thanks so much for listening to the first segment. Don't go anywhere. Be a quick commercial break and I'll come right back and I'll talk about how creativity applies to the mortgage process and buying properties. So I'll be right back with that. Hang tight for just a quick minute. Hello, friends. I just want to interrupt our episode today really quickly to talk to you about our multi-unit property loan program. We can loan on up to 10 units of residential properties. And as a matter of fact, even commercial use of some of that space is allowed, as long as it's restaurants, retail, or office space, and that it is less than 49% or up to 49% of the space, and the rest of it is going to be residential units. We can lend with as little as 25% down payments, and we don't care about your income for anything other than the rental income from the property. These properties typically cash flow really, really well. So if you're looking to expand your portfolio, look beyond just 4-unit properties and get yourself to 5 or 8 or even 10 units through my multi-unit investment property program. Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. So I've been talking about creativity, when you should be creative, when you shouldn't be creative. Let's talk about how that applies to doing a mortgage and specifically buying properties. So there's a couple of things I want to discuss here. First of all, for business owners, a lot of you are super creative on your taxes. I talked about that in the first segment. Don't dismiss the fact that there are ways to massage your taxes, and I'm an expert at that. Okay, I grew up in a tax household. Literally, my dad was an enrolled agent. He did taxes for a living. I was an indentured servant. So it was my job as a teenager to go every tax season and do taxes. And I got used to it. I paid attention. I'm reading, I'm learning, and I'm really good at understanding tax returns. Why does that matter? Because when you go to file your taxes in the spring, you want to show them to me before you file. In most situations, if you are buying a home and you've owned your business for more than 5 years, then I can use just the current 1 year of tax returns that you're filing. Now, sometimes I have to have 2 years, but in a lot of cases, I only need 1. And so think about that for a second. If I'm using 1 year of taxes and it's the year that you are filing, I don't care what you showed in profit in the past. So we can make this tax return look great. You might owe some more on taxes, but you're going to get the best possible terms. So you can be creative when you're thinking about how you filed all of your other taxes, and then you only need to file that one showing more profit. But here's the flaw with that. And I told you earlier, being creative can bite you in the long run, which is what about when interest rates drop and you want to refinance again? We're going to look at that year's tax return. Well, in that year's tax return, you're going back to being creative and showing less profits. And so now you have to file taxes again at higher profits in order to lower your interest rate. And you repeat the pattern as interest rates go down, and you're kind of being, you're losing some of the benefit of lowering your interest rate and paying less in payment because now you owe the IRS more. And so I want to introduce or reintroduce the idea of alternative income documentation for people who are self-employed. That's where I get to be creative. I've got 5 or 6 different ways I can prove your income. So I can use tax returns. If you are a 1099 employee, independent contractor, I have programs where I just plain look at your 1099. And I say, well, this is how much you brought in from Uber, or this is how much you brought in from the trucking company, as long as it's paid to you personally, not to your own LLC, okay? And I get to assume that 90% of that is profit. I don't need tax returns. I don't care what you told the IRS. Now, you got to have a bigger down payment with these alternative options, typically 10 or 15% minimum of a down payment. There's no down payment assistance programs, and you pay a little bit higher interest rate than if you had proven your income using your taxes. But I don't know about you. I'd rather pay a little bit higher interest rate and less money to the IRS, especially because that extra interest is tax deductible. So I'm saving money in taxes by paying a little bit more in interest. I don't want you paying more than you need to pay. But I don't want you paying a bunch of money in the IRS just to save money on this loan. And now when you go to refinance or sell and buy something else, you have to pay a bunch of money to the IRS again to get the best interest rates, that seems very counterproductive. And so these other alternatives, I can use bank statements to prove your income. I can use a P&L to prove your income. Each come with varying levels of risk to my industry, and therefore we have varying levels of willingness. That has to do with how big of a down payment you have to put down. That has to do with what your interest rates look like. It has to do with whether it's a primary home or a rental. If it's a rental property, we can be super creative and simply use the rental income that property is generating. And as long as it's enough to cover the mortgage payment, we're fine. Even if it's not enough to cover the mortgage payment, we're still fine. You just got to pay a little bit higher interest rate. So there's a lot of ways in which I can be creative in helping you solve problems without you paying more in taxes to the IRS. But I also can help you be creative in how you file your taxes. Not a tax preparer, not pretending to be a tax preparer, not going to file your taxes. I'm going to review your draft tax returns. So you're going to go see your tax preparer. You're going to create your draft of your tax returns, and then you're going to send those to me before they're filed with the IRS. Because before they're filed, we make changes the original copy is never seen. Once you file, you can make changes called amending your tax returns, but the original never goes away. And so the amendment, we will see what you changed, and we likely won't believe you. So it's very, very important you follow these steps appropriately. It's very, very important that you get good advice. And so whether you're looking to buy a primary home, refinance a property to lower an interest rate, or pull out cash, or you're looking to buy a second home, vacation home, investment property, you need to have good advice. You need to have good counsel. You need to have an advocate behind you that understands how to be creative, and more importantly, when it's appropriate to be creative. And I'm interviewing to be that person. I'd love the opportunity to talk with you. If you have any questions about anything, please feel free to reach out. Hope you have an absolutely wonderful week, and we'll talk to y'all next week. Bye-bye.